Okay, so my section this week was section 2, which is pages 34 through 39. So this section starts off with talking about outliers, and outliers are very extreme scores, and in some cases they must be paid special attention to because they could affect the results of the data. So in 2.3 it goes through steps when dealing with outliers. So first, to check for accuracy, to make sure that outlier is a true outlier. After that, determine whether you want to include it or exclude it from your data. If you're doing like averages or median or something like that, it could really screw up your summary, so you might want to just leave it as a footnote or a side note. And then you also might want to include the outlier because it could also enhance your understanding of the data. Then on to 2.4, it talks about relative frequency distributions. And relative frequency distributions are important variations of frequency distributions. They're a type of distribution that allows us to focus on the relative concentration of observations among different classes within the same distribution. Okay, they're useful when comparing two or more distributions based on different total number of observations. In order to construct them, you take the frequency for each class and divide it by the entire distribution. And it continues on to talk about percentages or proportions. Since a lot of us like to use rounded numbers, you can always change the proportion into a percentage, so you would take the individual proportion times 100 to get that. And then 2.5 talks about cumulative frequency distributions, and they show the total number of observations in each class in all lower ranked classes. They're useful when sets of scores, looking at them for relative standing within the distribution that assumes importance. In this case, proportions are usually converted into percentages to get to percentile ranks. When constructing cumulative frequency distributions, you take the frequency distribution of each class and add the sum of the frequencies of all classes ranked below it. And you start with the lowest rank and work upward. And in order to get the percentages, you do the cumulative frequency divided by the total frequency of distribution. Percentile ranks of an observation are the percentage of scores in the entire distribution with an equal or smaller values in that score, and they're used to describe the relative position of scores within its parent distribution. And when dealing with group data, you use the approximate percentile ranks rather than the actual, because you can't figure out the actual. Okay, and then 2.6 involves the frequency distributions for qualitative data, nominal data. It determines the frequency with which observation occupy each class. Ordered qualitative data, when there is an ordinal class to a qualitative data, the order should be preserved in the order of the frequency table. Relative and cumulative distributions of qualitative data, frequency distributions for qualitative variables can always be converted into relative frequency distributions. And then lastly, 2.7 talks about the interpretive distributions constructed by others. So when looking at distributions constructed by someone that isn't yourself, you should make sure to ask a lot of questions and be very critical of their data to make sure they did an accurate job of representing it, and try to ignore outliers or irregularities and look at the more big picture.